Hello Internet, I'm Zahn and welcome back to another art-related video. At the time of recording this, we are in the last few days of 2020, and just like I've done in previous years, I thought it would be good to take some time to reflect on the work that I've done online over the last year. And so what I've done, just like in previous years past, is I've taken a sampling of all of the artwork that I've posted. And like before, I'm going to be splitting this retrospective series into two parts. The first part is going to focus on the two-dimensional design work that I've done in Rhino. And the second part will be focusing on the pixel art sprites that I've done over the last year. And in order to keep the video from being too long, I streamlined the selection of designs that I wanted to talk about. For the 2D designs, if I pull my folder up here, I picked 20 items in total, sampled throughout the year of stuff I've posted. And I believe I did the same thing for sprites. Assuming I record these sessions at the same time, we'll see when we get there. But like I've talked about in the previous versions of this retrospective, this isn't so much a talking about how great my work is. That's not really the intent. The intent is to take a look back over a year's worth of art and talk about some pieces that I feel are noteworthy or that I have something to say regarding, and just sort of a way to reflect back on what was done. And what we can do is go ahead and jump in here. I will say that, like many have probably seen, 2020 was a year. It was definitely a challenging year in a lot of ways. I think for everybody in some form, whether you were directly affected by the pandemic or indirectly affected by the pandemic. So much about life as we know it changed a lot in 2020. So here's hoping that 2021 is an improvement. We'll go ahead and get started here. The first entry was posted on January 3rd of 2020. This is one of the first designs posted at the beginning of the year, and we're starting off with a Monster Hunter circular emblem, and this is for the creature Xenojiva. And like I've continued to do throughout the year, just like I have in the past, at the beginning of each month I post a new one of these. They'll either be a brand new design that I've drawn, or it will be a redesigned subspecies of a creature that I have posted previously. But I think the Monster Hunter circulars are one of the most consistent things that I've worked on throughout the years. Being as Monster Hunter is my favorite video game series, it's always fun to go in and try to draw these graphic representations of the different creatures. With new games coming out every other year or so, they definitely give me lots of material to work with. I've been very interested following the press information for Monster Hunter Rise, which is due out in March of 21. We have a demo coming out in January, and overall the regular YouTubers and folks I follow that cover Monster Hunter have had some really interesting things to say. I definitely will be working on more of these for the new creatures as we proceed into 21. So when we get to the next year's retrospective, you can expect to see more Monster Hunter designs. This one, not a whole lot to say. Xenojiva as one of the story end bosses in vanilla Monster Hunter world. It's a pretty interesting Elder Dragon design. When I drew it in emblem form here, I wanted to sort of replicate its alien nature and kind of build on themes of this otherworldly creature that's newly hatched. And overall, I think it turned out pretty well. There's a lot of detail, a lot of small pieces to this one. But I think the results were worth it in the end. Next up, we have another entry from the ongoing Sphere design series. This one is called Monochrome Raptor. I've put entries from the Sphere series in these retrospectives in the past because it's another one of the ongoing series that I try and add to throughout the year as I'm drawing things and working on new designs. As a real quick recap, in case you've never seen any of my previous videos talking about this stuff, the Sphere series are all shapes and designs drawn from a circular starting shape. The ground rule to this one is it has to start as a circle, and I can't do anything to alter the overall shape that would break the original baseline shape, which is the circle. So the challenge is coming up with designs and patterns that create a distinct either creature or shape, but also maintains the original starting shape at the same time. The end result here for this one was this sort of owl-like creature. It's got 6 eyes, like an alien type of creature, but maintains the pointed beak and these sort of tufted feathers, sort of inspired by the horned owl. Overall, the Sphere series is interesting. Whenever I feel like I need to sort of just free draw something without any real end goal, I'll start making one of these and just see what materializes. I can't remember how many more from the Sphere series we've got on the list, but it's always a challenge to create something unique and distinct using those set parameters for the designs. But overall, it's something I keep coming back to because it's always good exercise and just experimenting. And this one was posted on January 13th of 2020, in case I didn't mention at the beginning. I will try and remember to call out the date of when these were posted so we get sort of a progression of how I picked the samples here. Next up, this is another design from January. This one was posted on January 27th of this year. And this is the emblem design for Ruby Ash Pyrea. And this one is part of an ongoing series of sort of cross-collab designs with the Pixel Sprite art series that I also do. This design started as one of the pixel creatures from that series. It was a sort of serpentine dragon creature with wings, and kind of building on the idea of experimenting with design elements and overall ideas. Every once in a while I'll take one of those sprite designs and turn it into an actual two-dimensional emblem like you see here. The challenge being trying to preserve all of the pixel-based design elements while building on the piece to make it a little more detailed, since we're working in slightly more flexible format than when you're dealing with a small resolution. Overall, this one turned out decently, I think. The whole idea of having more freedom to draw something when working in design format versus sprite format is always interesting because I can pick and choose what I wanted to focus on. For this one, I wanted to preserve the long sort of coiling body and then the wings with the striped patterning to represent a fire element creature. Overall, it's something I want to work on more as we go into the next year, since I've uploaded a lot of entries in the sprite series, and I think it'd be kind of interesting to spend more time taking the design and translating them back and forth. And that could even go the opposite direction too, where I have a two-dimensional design drawn in Rhino 3D, which, if you're new to these videos, my design program of choice for this type of stuff is Rhinoceros or Rhino 3D. My software of choice for the sprites is Photoshop. But taking a two-dimensional design and creating a sprite from it is also something I'd like to experiment with more. I think that could be a good experiment and a challenge to go in the other direction as far as switching mediums. So we'll see. I'll make a point to think about doing that next time I have drawing session or stream. Next up, we've got a design from March 2nd of 2020. This was posted at the beginning of the month and is another Monster Hunter emblem. The reason why I included this one is because it's connected to the first one in the series that we started with. This is the emblem for Safi Jiva. Safi Jiva is the adult form of the Elder Dragon Xenojiva we saw earlier, And so since I included Xeno's emblem in the collection, I figured it'd be good to also include Safi's, since they're very similar in design. Both of them are large elder dragons with a lot of detail, but Safi is a bit more of a traditional dragon. The idea of a more standard red dragon was kind of interesting to see in Iceborne. The overall attributes that made Xeno'jiiva really alien-like are definitely not present here, but you can tell they're related. And so when I drew this particular circular emblem, I drew it from scratch. I didn't use the Xeno one as a base, but I wanted to try and preserve a lot of the shapes in the body and patterning to make it look like they were related. And overall, this one was a challenge, but because I already had something to work with, it wasn't too hard to sort of adapt and build on the design so it looks like a progression. Overall, I like Safi'jiiva's design as a creature in-game. It's more simple and less out there than some of the other Monster Hunter monsters, but I think you need that to sort of mix up all of the outlandish designs and keep things fresh. I'll be real curious to see what they do with the large-scale encounters in Rise. That'll probably be a common theme as we see other Monster Hunter designs on the list here. I'm definitely very interested to see where Rise goes, and I'll be picking it up as soon as it comes out in March. Next up, we have another entry on the Sphere Design series. This one was posted on March 9th of 2020. And this one is the design Fang Inversion. Like we saw with the previous entry in the Sphere series, the main ground rule states that it needs to be a circular shape to start. The overall design of this one was a bit more unusual in that I started with one half to create that sort of sharp tooth grinning creature, and then normally I will mirror that image across the y-axis to create a symmetrical shape. For this one, to sort of switch things up a little bit, I flip the shape vertically to create this inverted shape and mirrored it. So instead of it being symmetrical, it's sort of inversely symmetrical when it's flipped, and it creates this sort of two-faced looking design. I think it looks sort of like a yin-yang symbol if you squint your eyes at it. That wasn't really the result, but the end product kind of resembled that, which I think is interesting. This particular design was noteworthy enough to me that I decided to include it in our studio shop over on Redbubble. I ordered a print of this one on a shirt to see how the screen quality would turn out for this particular design, and overall it was pretty sharp. I'll need to do a product review over on our main site since it's been a while, and I would like to sort of spotlight some of the Redbubble products that I tested out for our studio designs. That'll be something that maybe I can do some point into 2021. Moving on, we have a design from April 13th of 2020. This one is Astral Weapon Osteodrus. And Osteodrus is an entry in the Sealed Ones of the Abyss design series. One that I've done a lot of work on but haven't added to recently. As a way to sort of introduce the different series that these designs come from, I'll just give a real quick blurb summary about what they are. The Sealed Ones series are meant to be these sort of otherworldly or demonic entities that were part of this lore piece that I've written up for some of the stuff I've been working on. And so the creatures tend to be these monster, demon type creatures that vary in design and shape quite a bit. This one, I wanted to experiment with the idea of sort of a serpent-like bone creature. The body itself are these long tendrils that were created using the copy of sections and bend commands in Rhino. The ability to manipulate large amounts of things and twist them around using that simple command makes creating things like these long tendrils pretty easy. And so I experimented around with that idea for this creature and then added the summoning sigil underneath it. The idea being it's a sort of runic character that is used to summon this creature, or it uses to summon magic. The Sealed Ones series, I think I need to revisit at some point because I haven't done much with it recently, and there's still a handful of designs in the series I haven't posted. At some point, I'll need to make it a priority to go back and explore some other ideas with these weird otherworldly creatures. Well, that'll be a goal for the next year as far as design work goes. Next up, we are still in the month of April. This one was posted on April 17th of 2020. And this is an entry in the Clan's Emblem collab that I've been working on. I also need to spend more time working on this series. I think in years past, I contributed more designs to this particular collab series. And in 2020, I didn't do that as much. But I do plan on spending more time with these characters. The whole point of the collab here is to take these chibi characters which were designed by one of the other artists in our studio and translate them into a more realistically proportioned design with sort of an action pose, and the silhouette form is what I used to do when I did the Brave Frontier fan art a long time ago. But the whole point of this series is to build on the ideas of the character. In this case, this particular character is able to summon creatures, and so her summon creature is this big monster in the back, and the character's name itself is Vritra Melioris. The challenge of creating these sort of anime-inspired silhouettes of these characters is interesting, and when I get the ability to play around with creatures or other types of things that are part of the character concept, then that gives me a little bit more freedom to experiment with ideas. And so this is part of the second wave of designs that I started doing. There are a number of ones in the series I haven't posted yet, but I do plan on working on the Clan's Emblem collab more, since it's a good series to come back to every once in a while when I want to mess around with some ideas and try something a little bit different. Moving on, we are now in the month of May. This one was posted on May 8th of 2020, and this one is called Armored Destroyer. This design is part of a somewhat new series, I believe, that started in 2019, and that's the Blade Wraith Collective. And the collective creatures are these alien organisms that sort of function like a large hive with different species and sort of castes of creatures that all perform different functions for this sort of alien collective. And as a result, when I want to try something different, I will work on entries in this series and see if I can come up with ideas for these alien life forms. The Armored Destroyer here is got a larger central body with its limbs down the bottom, and this upper part of its torso is where its head and this sort of core organ that these creatures have lies. This was meant to be more of a heavier assault type unit, and I think if I remember back to the lore post I put on the actual upload, it's meant to be sort of a defensive drone type creature. The idea of building out the lore for these pieces in addition to just the designs themselves is always a fun exercise in writing. But just like the previous collab series that I mentioned, I would like to go back to this particular one and add some more. What I might need to do in 2021 is update my design series legend. It seems like years ago I put up an image that had all of the different running themed series of designs that I work on. It was sort of a way to give people an overview of what all the different designs belong to as far as like sets of artwork, but it was also sort of a way to keep me reminded of everything I'm working on, and I really should refer back to that legend more often. I'll have to update it since things have been added to that series list of series since it came out. But I think we'll see more of the Blade Wraith Collective in 2021. Next up, we have a design that was posted at the end of May. This one was posted on May 29th of 2020. And here's another entry in the Arachnios Weavers design series. This is Kelt Gallos Tirgarel. The Arachnios Weaver series, which debuted I think a couple years ago now, as a recap, is a collection of these greater spider demon creatures. They all tend to have a sort of elemental alignment or affinity, and the main challenge of the designs is incorporating their elemental themes while maintaining one, as we see here, the spider shape, but also making it so that they're not just carbon copies of each one as we proceed. And this one, based on its name, should be a water element creature. So the way the legs and body and the parts around the body were drawn was meant to sort of be like this billowy, wispy material like you'd see in drifting kelp or algae out in the ocean. Between that and the sort of seafoam color scheme, I think it communicates the idea of like a water spider demon fairly well. Part of the challenge when doing these, since every once in a while I'll add a new one to the series, is making sure I don't just copy the previous color palettes or themes. So usually when I'm drawing these on stream, I will pull up the folder with all the finished designs and try and make sure I'm not falling into a familiar trap and ending up with something that's going to just be a copy. Overall, I want to work on this series more. I did start working on new designs for the Weaver series on one of our recent streams on Twitch. So just like before, I think keeping in mind that I have this series to add to in the future will be good for mixing things up. Next up, we're moving into the month of June. We're going to skip ahead towards the end of June. This one was posted on June 22nd of 2020, and this one is called Rune Glutton. This design, which I believe was from the Organics design series, is meant to be a combination of sharp and curved sections to make it look like some sort of life form or organism. Usually, if something doesn't fit into one of the theme series, but it has a lot of these organic traits, I will put it in that design series as sort of a way to keep it classified. But the overall organic series is very broad. It just means things that have a combination of biological or geometric designs, depending, but usually something that's going to be more organic looking, hence the name. And this one is a little unique because it's an inverted design. Normally, when I draw these two-dimensional designs in Rhino, there'll be a flat color or a combination of colors. But every once in a while, to sort of mix up how the patterns turn out, I will do what I call an inverse design and make them white on a dark background instead of a combination of colors on a white background. And that's yielded some interesting results. I have tested out what that looks like on our product store and Redbubble, and things that are white tend to come out just as cleanly as the things that are in a mix of colors. So I do definitely want to remember to do this every once in a while so I'm not getting stuck in a rut with the color paletting. But overall, this one turned out fairly well. It's got a lot of really small and fine details on it, and I don't think I ordered this one on any products, but I would be curious to see on a shirt or some type of case, or even maybe like a wall scroll type thing, how sharply a design would translate over. That might be something to think about for the next product test. Next on the list, we have the first of the Draconic Council designs. This one was posted on June 29th of 2020, and this one's called Landstone Archlord Eofoam. The Draconic Council series is another one that I've been working on for quite some time. In fact, the starts of that series go way back to when I was first getting into design work using Rhino. And the entries in the Council series are all these different types of dragon-ish creatures. They run a mix of ideas and themes and elements, but overall the dragon-like features are the main themes of the series. And for Eophone here, the idea was to create sort of a stone or earth dragon, and I wanted to create these sort of antler-like horns that I imagine if this was a rendered creature would be crystal or some sort of metallic ore, and the combination of earth tones and sort of browns and kind of copperish color kind of support the idea that this is a stone element creature. The Draconic Council series is sort of like a palette cleanser for me when I'm working on these designs in quick succession. If I work on a bunch of really complex or really time-consuming pieces, a lot of times when I'm moving from one design to the next, I'll throw in one of these dragon designs just as a way to sort of wipe the slate clean and let my mind wander, since unless a specific design pops into my head, a lot of times this is just free random drawing and whatever pops out is the end result. But overall, I do enjoy working on these, and we'll see an entry in the Draconic Council series towards the end, I think. That was a bit of a new thing for the design series overall. We'll talk about that when we get there. Moving on, the next design is from July 20th of 2020, and this one is called Optical Contagion. Like we saw in the previous entry from the Organics series, this one is a bit more of a focus on circular patterns. The main sections you see here with the circular frame-like shapes were arrayed around a central point 6 times using the polar array command in Rhino. And for this one, the main focus was taking that single section and building enough around it, and then seeing what it looked like when copied around a single point. The circular shapes themselves were sort of inspired by crop circles, those alien patterns you've seen in extraterrestrial sighting videos and media. When I had everything arrayed, the end result was this sort of cluster of shapes that made it look sort of like eyes, hence the name. Overall, the idea of arraying things around the central point is something I experiment with a lot because it's relatively easy to do, but it's also kind of interesting to see what the end results look like, since I usually don't have an idea of what these things are supposed to look like when I start. I'll start putting shapes together as I draw, and then I'll say, well, we have a single section of details, let's try and copy it around a central point and see what the end result is. And as long as it turns out to be something interesting, that's usually how the design gets created. Not much else to say about this one. I do like the color palette. The main black palette with the lighter sort of teal eye-like markings I think is a bit more distinct. I'm not sure why the middle is gray though. This might have been a copy-paste error, since I render these out of Rhino and then I put them into my image template in Photoshop. It's possible I forgot to delete this original section from the render, which is why it's not white like the rest, but if we just assume everything I do is intentional, then I look like less of a weirdo. We'll go ahead and move on. Next up, this design was posted on July 27th of 2020, and this is the first of the Armada entries in the series so far. Like we talked about earlier, for ongoing series that have been here for quite some time, the Armada series of designs are all based around ships, inspired by old school shoot 'em ups like your Space Invaders or Galaga. The whole design format here is meant to be a top-down view of the ship, like a spaceship, and the front would be up here, pointing upwards. And this particular one goes back to some of the old shoot 'em up known designs of past. Things like your Gradius or Galaxian, or even more modern ones like Ikaruga. The design here, which is called Celestial Dagger, takes a lot of those designs from those old school ships and sort of creates something that looks like it would be a spiritual successor. I think this one reminds me a lot of the ship from Galaga or Gradius, and I chose this sort of mix of whites and oranges to be a bit of a more distinct color palette. I will usually mix up my stream drawings with one of these ship designs, kind of like a palette cleanser, like the other one I mentioned in the Draconic Council, just because it's pretty hands-off as far as coming up with a ship design without any real end goal. And this one, I did want to create something that emulated the kind of triangular shape of those old school shoot-'em-up ships. And that's how we get the end result here. The Armada series is a staple of design series, and one that I will be working on indefinitely. It's just, sometimes it's a challenge to come up with something unique. Okay, moving on, we're now in August of 2020, getting towards the later part of the year. I included this one in the list because I had some things to say about it. This one is called Hunger Eternal, and if you're new to my YouTube channel and the type of art I do and things I talk about, it might not be apparent that I'm a big fan of internet memes. I spend a lot of time on the internet, and reading all sorts of different things about running trends and things that become memes over time is one of the things I enjoy about looking through content on the internet. And over the last year, one of the most interesting things that I sort of stumbled upon as it became more prevalent on the internet is the whole idea of Garfield memes. Specifically the I'm Sorry John meme, which spawned its own subreddit, and that's how I sort of found out about this. To give a real quick recap, the I'm Sorry John meme involves incarnations of Garfield interacting with his owner John, and Garfield is this sort of otherworldly, Lovecraftian, demonic creature that exists to torture John in various forms. And so the subreddit itself, which sprung from the idea of taking this pretty nondescript cartoon cat and making it an abomination, caught my eye. I don't even know how I saw it first. I think I saw a random link to it on Reddit. But the amount of creativity and designs of people who've taken Garfield and twisted him into this horrific creature was very fascinating to me. And so after reading through a lot of that for a while, on one of my streams, I must have been in a weird mood that day, but I decided to try my own hand at creating a Garfield creature. I've heard them called Gorefields in some media. But the whole idea is it's got to maintain the traits of Garfield so it's recognizable. But other than that, you're given free reign to create whatever monstrosity you want. And what I settled on for this one was a mix of sort of a demon and a tentacle creature. The original shape of Garfield's noticeable here in the head is pretty much the only thing that is maintained from the original design. Everything else is sort of in line with tentacle monsters or kind of Lovecraftian horror, Cthulhu-esque type things. I think my particular drawing style lends itself well to creatures and designs like this, so it was a fun experiment to try and just create something from scratch, adhering to the rules of the meme. And I know the folks who were tuned into my stream that night were very confused by this one. Once I had gotten a decent way into the drawing itself, I remember I was drawing different sections. I started with the face, and at some point I started working on the body and all these tentacles. And so I was zoomed in Rhino working on all these really fine details for a while. And one of the folks on my stream must not have been paying attention at the beginning, Because once I got through a big section and zoomed out, the first thing he asked me was, is that supposed to be a Garfield? At which point I explained the meme and it made more sense. But overall, this is a fun experiment. I may make it a reoccurring thing each year to try and do a new one of these. One of these streams when I get on and start working through designs. Maybe I will work on creating a new Garfield design. I feel like that'd be a good challenge. Could also be a good idea for a YouTube video. We'll see. As long as I don't get sued by Jim Davis, then that's what matters. But yeah, this is my foray into relevant memes in 2020. It was a lot of fun and something I'd like to do more of. Next up, we have another entry in the Organics series, I believe. This one is called Tethered Nexus from August 31st of 2020. This one is a combination of sharp geometric sections. I used the polar array to create things like the outer spokes of the wheel here, and then the inner sharp parts of these triangles, and then likewise the parts you see here on the inner section. As I was drawing this one, I thought I'd create something a bit more different than the regular ones that have completely arrayed symmetrical sections, and that's how we created this sort of inner core, which looks like it's an organ or a heart or something surrounded by all of these other sharp parts. The idea that I'm not falling into the same tropes of symmetrical or geometric designs is something I need to remind myself to do more. I think any artist probably knows that when they stick to their familiar territory, because it's the most comfortable, that can lead to sort of being stuck in a rut as far as design process goes. So I always try and tell myself every once in a while to try something different. And if I'm in a particularly experimental mood, you might get something like this, or something like the Garfield design, and it just depends. But I did like the results of this one, since it's a bit of a departure from the usual ones in the series. And so that's how we ended up with the Tethered Nexus. Next up, we have a design that was posted on October 9th of 2020. We are getting towards the later part of the list. I think there's only a handful more before we hit December. This one is called Riverspine Anguilla. This design was part of a YouTube video series I did called the Random Shape Drawing Challenge. And I do want to talk about the Random Shape Challenge type designs, since those became a bit more prevalent this year as well, and sort of a long-running design series. Sort of recap what I did in the video. I, working in Rhino, would take the close curve command and draw, usually with my eyes closed, a random starting shape. The rule is it had to be a shape drawn completely at random and closed off at the end, which is how you got this sort of blob-like shape here. And the point of the challenge is to take that shape and use it to draw a fully fleshed out design while maintaining the original shape in some form. So the main rule is I have to keep the shape in its original form as much as possible, and I can't distort it. So in other words, I couldn't pull a section out or stretch it in a different way. I can add things to it that might give it some additional detail or cut things out, but I can't alter the silhouette of the main shape as part of the challenge. And so for this one, the end result of that is this sort of sharp-finned eel creature. The starting shape itself is its head here. What I did was I cut some textures out of the middle and I added teeth and spines, but overall, if you were to take this starting shape and overlay it, it would be unchanged in this part right here. And as I did these for the video series, it was interesting to see how the design sort of emerged, since I didn't have any idea what I was going to draw when I created the starting shape. The point of the challenge was to come up with something as I worked on the fly, sort of like a free drawing exercise. And overall, I think the results turned out pretty well. I wasn't expecting something like this, but it ended up working out decently. And what I've done on a lot more work recently, when I want to experiment with free drawing ideas is I will follow the same rules where I'll create a shape and I've got to do something with it and create a design from that shape. And I don't know if there's any other ones in the collection here, but I'm going to be debuting that in 2021 as its own standalone series because the format's a little different from the stuff I normally do. The render here is meant to show the final design and then the starting shape. And rather than confuse people, since I had some people ask me what that shape is supposed to be, I think I will lump that into its own design series. That way people looking at the different entries will know they follow the same rules. But overall, random drawing challenges were interesting. I really need to do a similar one for sprites, where I take a random outline shape and I've got to create a fully fleshed out sprite design from that. I've done it on stream, but I don't think I've done it for a video yet. So that'll be another thing to think about for next year. Moving on, our next design is from October 19th of 2020. This is the first entry in the selection here from the Elemental Circulars design series that I work on. Much like the Monster Hunter circular emblems, the Elemental Circulars are original designs that I've come up with. I will usually write a short piece of lore to go with each one, but they're meant to be these creatures or monsters or what have you that follow the same circular design format as the Monster Hunter ones. And this one here, which is called Seldra, is a stone element creature and has a sort of serpent-like shape, hence its title as the Skeletal Naga. The texturing and details on the body and limbs are meant to sort of look like bone armor. The snake-like body lends itself well to the circular format, which made that easy. The overall design was created using the array tool like I've talked about before. If we look at the way the design is laid out, I use the array tool to create the body sections and copy them around a central point, and then draw in things like the head, the neck, and the arms here. Overall, the Elemental Circulars are a way for me to try and take the ideas from the Monster Hunter circular project and do something unique with it. Create an original design of my own using the things that I sort of refined drawing Monster Hunter creatures all these years. And there may be at least one more in the series. I can't remember if I selected any other ones. But I add to the Elemental Circulars every once in a while, and I try and remember to come back to it since it gives me a lot of opportunity to experiment. Okay, we are now moving in the month of November, getting towards the tail end of the collection here. This one was posted on November 6th of 2020, and this one is called Contrast Ichthyos. Like the eel design we saw a couple back, this one was created using the same random drawing parameters. Problem is, this one was before I decided to start including the original random design as part of the final product. As a result, you don't have the original starting shape that I used to create the design here. But if we look at the shape itself, I believe it's the head and this part going up to the tail. So this main part here where the mouth and eye are and the body going all the way up to this part of the tail is the original design, I believe. The best way to look would be to look at the speed drawing video since it shows the starting shape. But the end result of this one was a sort of fish-like creature. And in order to make the design a little more unique, I created a contrasting color version down here, which is this sort of yin-yang theme again. But overall, it was an interesting experiment and sort of another example of how I have no idea what the random shapes are going to yield. Sometimes it'll be a creature, sometimes it'll be more like a geometric pattern. But overall, when I can't think of something specific I want to draw, I will usually create a random shape and just see what comes out as part of the free drawing process. This one was also added to our store, but I haven't tested the product design yet. Seems like it'd be a decent shape or a pattern for something like a hoodie. Next up, we are finishing the month of November. This one was posted on November 24th of 2020. And this one is Vermilion Wrath Tyrgul. And this one is something I alluded to towards the beginning as far as the Draconic Council series is concerned. Up till now, the Draconic Council has consisted of just the head renders like we saw for the previous one. And the head renders would be either a front view like I talked about with that previous design, or it would be a side view of the head, side profile of the creature. One thing I've been working on sort of in the background when I have time is renditions of those dragon creatures, but full body renders. And Tyrgul here was the first of those to be posted. Depending on the elemental themes and what I think would make the most sense for the creature itself, the challenge is taking those designs and creating a fully fleshed out piece or a piece of art from it. And as a result, the full body renders of the Draconic Council tend to be a lot more detailed and take a lot longer to make. But it is an interesting challenge to take the original design. Again, I'm starting with just a head, and this one comes from a very old dragon design that I used. I redrew the head, trying to sort of condense the features, and then I came up with the idea of this winged serpent dragon shape for the rest of the body. The parts of the body here were drawn in a single set, and then I copied them into one long straight piece, and then I bent the piece into place in a couple sections to create the winding shape you see here. Rather than use something like the polar array, since we're not going in a circle, it made more sense to bend the shapes in place accordingly using that command. Overall, there is a lot of work to be done on the full body renders of the Draconic Council. I plan on doing a lot more work with that in the future. It's a pretty big challenge to take just a head or face shape and come up with an idea of something fully fleshed out. So you can expect to see more entries in the full body renders of the Draconic Council in 21. And also for the product test, this was one of the ones I ordered on a hoodie. I wanted to see if the folks at Redbubble with their shirt screening technology could get something with really fine, small detail like this. And it turned out decently. They were able to do it and then pull it off. But I could tell the overall sharpness of the image was reduced slightly just because there's so many of these small sections. I think if I was going to design something purely for our Redbubble products, I'd want to make it so it's not quite as compressed and all these small sections near each other. It would create a lot more sharp design, I think. But that'll be something to worry about on future ones. We are moving on to the month of December. I think there's only one or two from this month, seeing as how we're not done with the month yet. But this one was posted on December 21st, 2020, and this one's called Blossoming Marine. And this one is from the Geochromatics design series, one that I haven't really done a lot for in 2020, and one I need to remember to go back and work on some more. The Geochromatics designs are meant to be these sort of geometric or organic shapes that combine different layers of color. The main thing that stands out is that there are multiple layers to the designs. Instead of it being just a flat single layer design, I will take the pattern and whatever it is, being a geometric one or something arrayed around a central point like this, I will draw that and then combine it with another shape underneath to create a multi-layered design. And the end result for this one was this sort of flower-like shape. The color palette is sort of a mix of these golds and blues to sort of make things stand out when layered together like this. But overall, I need to go back and work with the Geochromatics series more. A lot of them follow this kind of flower or star shaped pattern. So I need to think a little bit about how to build on the ideas and make some new entries in this series that are going to be a little more distinct or different than the ones we've seen so far. Okay, this turns out this one is the last one. I did post something last week, but it wasn't a design. That's why there's nothing else in the series here. But that should do it for the 2D design retrospective in 2020. Overall, there was a lot of work done, and a lot of work on existing series and a couple new ones that started. I do think that this year was productive. Despite all of the challenges and everything in 2020, I tried to keep my output of design work and different things consistent, because if you're not creating things, and it's real easy to get sort of bogged down, and getting artist block is never fun. But overall, I do think there was some decent work done this year. I'm looking forward to hopefully better things in 2021. And what I will do is wrap up the section for this one now. And then when we come back for the second part of the design retrospective, we'll be looking at the pixel sprite designs that were posted in 2020. So I will see you guys then.